starts in 1 minute.
I'll just wait again.
Ladies and gentlemen, program starts in 1 minute.
Donde todos somos como hermanos, así es Medellín. Medellín, flor de primavera, eres la primera, lo puedo decir. Mi Medellín,
Medellín, brillante lucero, tu nombre llegó al mundo entero. Medellín, brillante lucero, tu nombre llegó al mundo entero.
ay, qué feliz me siento cuando escucho a mi gente contar remembranzas que no olvidarán, forman parte de su identidad. Medellín, qué hermoso tú eres, todas tus mujeres son dignas de ti. Medellín, si lejos me encuentro, mi corazón necio se quiere salir.
Quedo en medallo.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, in Helsinki and online. Welcome. Acceleration of circular businesses. Sorry for the playback salsa. We couldn't afford the live band after the grand opening, but I hope you're okay with that. My name is Daniel. I'm going to be your host for the next 90 minutes. And we're going to have a pretty fast-moving, dynamic session ahead of us. So in the first part, we're going to hear what is it that customers want in the future? An easy question, right? But we have 3 very eye-opening cases on that. Then in the second part, we're going to look at how to mainstream this kind of business, how to get started, how to implement, how to scale, what kind of support is there. And with 4 amazing speakers on that one. And then lastly, we're just going to have a nice little panel with all the speakers on these topics and have a glimpse on the future. Does that sound good? All right. And we need your help for this. So we're going to be using the WCEF app. So you can check out the message wall, select the location. We are in the Finlandia Hall right now. And you can submit questions and comments, and I'll be using those in my discussion with the speakers. All right? Great. Before we unleash our amazing speakers, I want to give you a quick introduction on why we're actually talking about these topics to begin with, and to have everybody on the same table and on the same page as well. And this comic is pretty much the answer. So you don't have to be a novelist to realize that we can't continue to base our economic prosperity and growth on material consumption, on overusing resources. And Planet Overshoot Day comes faster and faster every year. And we heard about the situation with biodiversity and so on in the first session. So this is serious stuff. A quick fact of the day. Did you guys know that there are 300,000 items in the average American home? 300,000. So what we need to do is we need to be able to create value without material consumption, right? Well, the good, bad news is that we have a lot of potential for that. The world is full of waste, inefficiencies, and unused capacities in all areas of life. And I'm going to give you a few examples. So in Europe, if you take any given material, on average, that is used 1 time. So you take your pen from your briefcase, and the material that has been used to make that pen is only used for that pen. And sadly, that holds true to almost all materials and products. Okay, the situation is getting better, it's true, and especially after this week, right? But it's pretty devastating. Also, cars is a typical example. So you use your car 8% of the time. And usually when you use your car, it's 1.3 persons in the car. So there's actually an interesting calculation that in Helsinki, 4% of all the cars in Helsinki could do all the driving needed if the cars were shared and the rides were optimized. So if you have kind of an artificial intelligence operator coordinating all the driving, 4% of all the cars in Helsinki could do all the driving that is being done today. Talk about inefficiencies, right? Okay, and if you think about all the stuff you own, I don't know, your house, your car, your boat, your mountain bike, your tractor, your washing machine, the furniture in your house, the music you listen to, even your guest room and so on, the question becomes, do you really need to own it? Do you even want to own it? I don't want to. I don't know about you. And could you just use it when you need it and pay for that use? The planet and your friends would appreciate that. And so what I'm saying is that we're moving from ownership to access. We're moving from consumers to users. And we're going to hear about that today. But based on this intro, I'm going to give you a quick and dirty definition of circular economy. And that's simply making the most out of existing things. So, in summary, circular economy is relevant because of at least 2 key impacts. First of all, the economic impact, money. So fixing these inefficiencies that we talked about is big business, also in B2B. And globally, its opportunity worth $4.5 trillion, trillion dollars. And also, of course, the planet, environmental impact. With the circular economy business models that you see here on the left-hand side, you can cut emissions in any sector up to 70%. And there is empirical proof on both of these. Thirdly, social impact. This is more of a new thing in this context, but we're going to actually discover this today with our speakers. So, what I'm saying is, if you look at the slide and the logos and the companies there, today we're moving from pioneers to mainstream. 5-10 years ago, we had companies like Philips, Michelin, Caterpillar, and a few others exploring these models. But today, we are seeing applications of these business models in any industry, in all industries. So, I'm not making this up. Every third CEO globally is already exploring circular economy business models. This is last year, right? If we look at Finland, we looked at top 100 by revenue, biggest companies in Finland last year, and 27% of those had circular economy in their business strategy last year. I think 3 years ago, 5 years ago, that number would have been a few percent, and it's increasing fast. So we're really in an interesting time right now. One more example. Kasvuryhmä, a very cool collective of the fastest growing SMEs, scale-ups in Finland. So together, these 200 companies are aiming to grow from 3 billion in revenue to 15 billion in revenue in the next 5 years. So they were asked, okay, how are you going to get this growth? Where does it come from? And the answer was, in the top 3 answers, they had the product as a service business model. So, without further ado, I want to introduce to you our first speaker of today. And it's actually a company who's indeed making the most out of existing things. Peerby is first in the world to create a liquid platform of sharing consumer goods at scale. The Peerby platform manages over 1 billion worth of consumer goods. Dear audience, please help me welcome serial entrepreneur, actor, CEO, and co-founder of Peerby, Dan Wedepool.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be able to present a little bit of our future, or at least what I believe could be our future, if we decide to share. My name is Dan Wedepool. I'm the founder of Peerby. And Peerby is a website and app that enables people to borrow the things they need from others in their neighborhood. And there is a good reason to do that, I believe. Because did you know that 38% of the environmental impact, the ecological footprint of a consumer in the Netherlands comes from the consumption of stuff? So that's more than eating meat and flying combined. This is research from CE Delft. And that while most of our stuff sits idle most of the time. So all that impact is basically for nothing. If you look at this consumer product, a power drill, for example, then 97% of its capacity goes to waste. We don't use it. That's the reason why we've created a platform that enables consumers to access and share this idle capacity. So by applying this principle, a power drill that would normally serve 1 person can now serve 32 people. And this is just an average normal consumer power drill. We're able to build machines, devices that last hundreds, maybe thousands of times longer. So sharing consumer items has a massive potential for reducing our ecological footprint. An average household item shared just once already reduces our impact by a lot, and it generates social capital. By connecting people in neighborhoods that otherwise might not have met, we create new connections, and we actually create healthier and safer neighborhoods. By sharing products, we're actually also we can have a huge impact on a more circular economy. There's just one problem with sharing, and that is it doesn't start with an R. But if you if you look at this map, then you can actually see that sharing can play a massive role in the landscape. It first of all, it helps the refuse and the reduce angle of the circular economy. If one power drill is shared, that means 31 power drills do not need to be manufactured. We don't need the resources, we don't need to transport them, we don't need to package them, we don't need to put them in stores. It's a massive potential save. And from that sharing, we're actually starting to see sort of follow-on effects. People that share start to realize what the lifetime value of their product is. And for them, it starts to make sense to invest in better products, higher quality products, products that are easy to repair, to maintain, and products that are therefore have longer lifetimes. So we're already doing this, but at a relatively small scale. So I asked myself the question, what can we do to accelerate this? How can we move this from a group of early adopters to the world? How can we disrupt this linear model? And when I think of disruption, I think of platforms. I believe platforms can play an important role in disruption, in changing the world. And we can see some great examples of disruption change that already happened. I'm curious, who of you has bought an encyclopedia in the last 5 years? Oh, I see one hand. Great. One person. I think there's been a massive change thanks to a platform like Wikipedia. Something that used to be a scarce good, hard to access, locked behind people's doors, turned into something that we have access to 24 hours a day, almost for free, as long as we have an internet connection. We can access the information from an encyclopedia online. It's also redefined scarcity, so this content that was captured in big stacks of physical books has become virtually free to reproduce and to spread. And it has decentralized the authority. It used to be a small group of experts that decided what was in an encyclopedia. Today it is the world. It is a crowd of people online that decide what's being put in the encyclopedia. So what could a platform for consumer goods look like in the future? Well, first of all, I think we need a network. And the network for information was the internet, the information superhighway, as they called it in the early days. We need a goods superhighway. And I believe part of it will be in physical locations, but another big change that could have a very positive impact on this is the development of autonomous vehicles. Because an autonomous vehicle will be a shared vehicle by default. It doesn't make sense for an autonomous vehicle to be parked if it can just move on and pick up the next person. But these autonomous vehicles also have trunks. Imagine what could happen if the scarcity of location is changed the way that the scarcity of information was changed by the internet. And just like the early days of sharing content, I believe what we're seeing today, it's already sort of starting to happen. People are sharing peer-to-peer, just like the early music and video sharing. People are starting to share the things they own. But we don't want to stop there. We want manufacturers to get involved. We want them to develop business models for pay-per-use and develop products that are meant for sharing. That's why we've launched a pilot together with Kercher, the Dutch or German leading manufacturer of pressure washers. That's why we've developed a pilot in Belgium with floating products that are tracked through GPS trackers and move from one consumer to another. And once we gather all these products on platforms, we can start to do more. Why stop at sharing if you can add more and more services like repair, like recycling, like insurance? I believe that as we start to gather all this information online, we'll also be able to manage our goods way more efficiently. And by managing them online, we start to capture data. And we start to develop better insights of how long products last, how often do they need to be maintained. We can create more efficient streams of products to be recycled. And that data, that can eventually help us to make better decisions for what we buy, and it can help nudge manufacturers to create better products, so that we no longer have products that are designed for consumers and for obsolescence, but we'll have products that are designed for communities, that are designed for people and for the planet. I believe that a circular economy is a sharing economy. Thank you.
Hold on, Dan. I want to ask one question from you. The audience wants to know, how about scaling up? How do you do it? Where are you going next?
Where are we going next? I think what we're trying to do with this platform is figure out a network effect. Because we believe that the one thing that will really scale this and that is more powerful than traditional marketing, is figuring out how do you create that viral loop. That loop where one person comes in, they experience the product, and they invite 2 other people. Exactly. And that becomes 4 and 8 and 16, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. That's the thing that we believe will help really scale this very rapidly.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dan Wittepel.
Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce you a company who actually might have done just that, what you've said, Dan, or at least are doing pretty well in that area. I want to introduce you to Olio. And so Olio just won the award of Next European Unicorn in Paris at the Vivatech conference. Olio also now has over 1 million users. Please welcome Tessa Clark, CEO and co-founder of Olio.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to share with you the Olio story from inception to over 1 million users. And I've resisted the temptation to wear my best unicorn outfit. Save that for another day. The Olio story really starts here. This is my parents' farm, and this is where I grew up. And I learned firsthand just how much hard work goes into producing the food that we all eat every single day. And as a result of that, I wouldn't dream of throwing it away. And so it was that I found myself 4 years ago. I was living in Switzerland, moving back to the UK, and on moving day, the removal men said to me that I had to throw away all of the food that we hadn't eaten. This was something that I absolutely was not going to do. There was some beautiful, non-perishable food there. And so much to their irritation, I stopped packing, I bundled up the food, my baby and my toddler, and I set out onto the streets to try and find someone to give that food to. And to cut a long story short, I failed miserably. And through that experience, I just thought, this is crazy. Why isn't there an app where I can share this food with someone living nearby who would like it or want it? And that was the metaphorical light bulb moment, if you like, for Olio. The first thing that my co-founder Sasha and I did was research the problem of food waste. And what we discovered absolutely shocked and horrified us. Globally, 1/3 of all the food we produce gets thrown away each year. That's worth over $1 trillion. And it's not just the food, it's the land, the labor, the energy, the packaging, the manufacturing, the distribution, the refrigeration. All of those resources go to waste. And alongside that, we have unconscionable levels of hunger. We have 800 million people living in hunger. And they could be fed on 1/4 of the food that we waste in the Western world. Now, looking at that previous photo, it's easy to assume that hunger is something that takes place somewhere else, in the developing world. But I can assure you that hunger is also absolutely prevalent here in the developed world too. So in a country like the UK, we have over 8 million people living in food poverty, which for reference is equivalent to the size of the population of London. And as if all of that weren't enough, food waste is an environmental tragedy. Given the fact that a land mass larger than China is used every year to grow food that is never eaten, and then it goes on that incredibly long supply chain, and then when it's thrown away and goes into landfill, it creates methane. As a result of all of that, food waste, if it were to be a country, would be the third largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the USA and China. But what most people do not realize is that in the Western world, well over half of all food waste takes place in the home. That's in contrast to less than 5% that takes place at a retail store level. So the average UK family, for example, throws away £800 of food each year. That's a quarter of the weekly shop. So what that means is that we, and by that I mean each and every one of us, we are half of the problem. But if you flip that on its head, it's incredibly exciting because that means that we can be half of the solution. And that's exactly what Olio is intending to do. It's intending to provide the solution. And so let's imagine that you are going on holiday or perhaps coming to a 3-day conference in Helsinki, and you have some lovely vine tomatoes in your fridge, or actually not in your fridge, because that's not where you store tomatoes, you store them out of the fridge. So let's imagine you have some lovely vine tomatoes on your countertop, and you're not going to get round to eating them. What you do is you take a photograph of those tomatoes, you add them to the Olio app. Your neighbours who are living nearby get an alert, letting them know that something new has been added. They can then request that food, and then they pop round and pick it up. So we piloted Olio in 5 postcodes in North London in the second half of 2015, and we made it available across the UK at the end of January 2016. In just over 3 years, over 1 million people have joined Olio, and we've achieved that on a marketing budget of close to zero. But the real magic of Olio takes place on the doorstep, when 2 neighbours connect and share, when they build those social relationships in their local community. And we couldn't have achieved any of this were it not thanks to our 30,000 and counting ambassadors. These are people who are passionate about our mission, passionate about making Olio work in their local community, and they're spreading the word on social media, but with letters, posters, and flyers. And it's thanks to these individuals that we've seen food successfully shared in 49 countries so far. So, what have we learned on this journey? Well, the first thing that we have learned is that increasingly people are waking up and realizing that we live in a horribly wasteful world, and they do not like it. Our research shows that 1 in 3 people are physically pained throwing away good food. Now, that might sound a bit extreme, but if you take a moment to actually think about it and think why that is, it makes perfect sense. Food is our most precious resource. It's our life source. We have evolved over the past 2 million years as a species to protect and to preserve our most precious resource. And we're very unique amongst species in that we actually share that resource. And so as a result, we have evolved, we are hardwired to, on the one hand, dislike throwing away food, and on the other hand, to feel amazing sharing it. And that dislike of waste applies not just to food, but to resources more broadly. The second thing that we have found is that whilst we live in a world where we are more connected than we have ever been, we are actually sadly lonelier than we have ever been. Last year, the UK government took an unprecedented move and they appointed the first Minister for Loneliness. We have 9 million people, that's almost 20% of the British population, who say that they are always or often lonely. And so this explains whilst our users tell us that they join Olio because they hate waste, why they keep using it, why they rave about it, why they love it, is because they actually get to connect with a neighbour in their community, on the doorstep, in real life, and it feels amazing. The third thing that we've learned is that it is very, very easy to feel incredibly overwhelmed when we look out to the world and just see the truly depressing state of affairs. And our users tell us that actually they see Olio as a beacon of light. They tell us that it is restoring their faith in humanity. And that is because it's making them feel empowered. They recognize that they don't have to wait for governments to take some action. They don't have to wait for businesses to take some action. They can make a difference themselves right here, right now. And so to summarize, we believe that and we are hearing that the sort of consumers of the future, if you like, are wanting to move away from our current world, which is wasteful, which is lonely, and which can feel overwhelming, to a world which is sustainable, which is social, and one in which individuals and communities are empowered. And so, as we look at the world in which we find ourselves today, where the IPCC has warned that we have 12 years to avoid catastrophic climate change, where the UN has warned that 1 million species, and by the way, that's our life support system, is at risk of extinction, and where last year Earth Overshoot Day was the 1st of August, which what that means is that we had used up all of the resources that the Earth could replenish by the 1st of August, then it is very, very clear that the status quo cannot continue. And consumers, customers, whatever you want to call them, are increasingly waking up to this. And so as a result, our vision for Olio is an unashamedly bold one, and that is because the planet needs us to have that vision. And our ambition is to have 1 billion people using Olio within the next 10 years, all connected so that on a daily basis we are sharing our most precious resources rather than throwing them away. And in doing that, we are incredibly inspired by the words of Gandhi, who once said, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Tessa. The audience really wants to know, how do you make money?
We were talking earlier on about the likely questions that we might receive. So the honest answer is that to date, because we need to get 1 billion people using Olio in 10 years' time, and we're currently on 1 million, we've got a long way to go. So we have been resolutely focused on growth and engagement, and we've not, at this point in time, been focused on monetization. However, we are planning to monetize. We're a sort of profoundly commercial organization. We believe in profit with purpose, and the business model that we'll be implementing will be a freemium one, whereby the users who are getting most value from Olio will pay for a monthly subscription to have access to a premium version of the app.
Thanks. Excellent.
Thank you.
Big hand to Tessa. Are you still with us? Everything good? Okay, great. Next, we have Philips, one of the largest electronic companies in the world and a pioneer of circular economy. I want to pick out one highlight. So last year, Philips announced in Davos to take back all of their large-scale medical equipment from their customers by 2020 already, and extend that practice to all professional equipment by 2025. An engineer, a musician, a change maker. Dear audience, please help me welcome the lead of Philips Circular Economy Program, Harald Tepper.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to also give a bit of a flavor of how multinationals stand in this transition, and what are the promises for us, and maybe also the barriers that we face. So I'm Harald Tepper. I'm leading the Circular Economy Program for Philips globally. And maybe before I dive in, it's good to understand what Philips is at the moment. So we are on a journey to become a focused health technology company, which means that we manufacture products and services with a healthcare focus, ranging from large medical equipment like MR machines, X-ray machines, etc., that we sell to hospitals, all the way to consumer products focused at healthy living, like blenders, juicers, toothbrushes, and air fryers. But we are not that light bulb company anymore that you might have in mind, and where actually our journey to a circular economy has started also, in a sense. So our mission and vision is to make the world healthier and more sustainable through innovation, or through meaningful innovation. So we strongly believe that healthy people and healthy planet are actually two parts of the same coin and should always go hand in hand. And we also strongly believe that if we are authentic about driving that is a real driver for innovation also into our company. That's why we invest in it so much. At the same time, we also are a strong believer that you need to measure this and that you need to be fact-based around this. And that's why we have translated this into an ambition to improve the lives of 3 billion people per year by 2030. And we are measuring this at a global level, and you can actually follow this on our website, on our results website of the annual report, or actually every quarter. In the details of our sustainability program, you see those two angles coming back. So we actually have 3 focal areas. We want to improve the lives of 400 million people, also by 2030 in underserved markets. So really driving new innovative solutions to reach the people that actually do not have access to affordable healthcare at the moment. And on the planetary side, we have the ambition to become carbon neutral by 2020 in our operations, and drive green and eco-design and circular economy. And also diving into the circular economy, we have set ourselves quite some ambitious targets. So by 2020, we want to be able to attribute 15% of our revenue to circular products and services. And we are currently at almost 12%. We want to be completely circular in our own operations, really recycling 90% of our operational waste and making sure that none of the remaining waste goes to landfill. And also there we are currently halfway with all our factories around the world. And then recently, indeed, we announced to close the loop, to really take back all our large-scale equipment from our customers by 2020 and extend those practices to our full professional portfolio by 2025. Now, especially the latter pledge is not really easy, right? Because you are really changing the whole supply chain and also changing your customer behavior. So we felt we cannot do this alone. And that's when we announced this pledge, we teamed up with a couple of other front-running large equipment manufacturers that really have the same ambitions. And this has been a very impactful journey for us, really to form a learning cell with all these companies that might, from the brink of it, look very different. They are very different, but they are all putting large stuff on the market and have the ambition to take it back. And interestingly, we all ran into the same problems and barriers, but also see the same opportunities. So we are currently looking to extend this coalition. So if you feel you will need to be part of this, please come forward to me afterwards, and let's see how we can team up to really advance this journey as well. Now, I talked about circular revenue. These are the 5 categories with which we actually measure our circular products and services. From the left-hand side to the right-hand side, really moving more and more towards access over ownership models, rental models, lease models, etc. Refurbishing complete systems, complete MR systems, and when that's not possible anymore, still taking out parts and components and refurbishing those, and also extending the lifetime of our machines by on-site and off-site upgrades. And last but not least, and that's really of most interest for us for our consumer products, really increasing the amount of recycled content in our products. So we are also a leader there with the amount of recycled plastics that we apply in our consumer products. And even though we heard these great stories about where consumers are nowadays, when we started this journey in 2012, 2013, we really felt that the consumer market was not quite ready for the new business models that we might apply in the B2B market. And that's why we said, let's focus first on the things that we can control, which is taking in less and less virgin materials. So that's interesting, maybe also later for this discussion. So what are we doing also in the consumer world? Now let me first start with an example that didn't work. So here you see 2 kitchen appliances. They might look the same. They do approximately the same, but the left hand one came with a guarantee of 15 years. So really was designed to last forever. And at the same time, we still had a product on the market that came with a guarantee of 2 years. And maybe you already guessed it. The first one didn't sell at all, and the second was a major commercial hit. So, and it was really a good lesson for us. I mean, you learn the most from your failures, I strongly believe. The lesson here is that the customers and consumers, especially, are not, in general, willing to pay just for sustainability, right? Your circular model needs to be better than your linear model. And you need to think about what is the pain point of your consumer and try to find models that go into the direction that you want to go, but at the same time have a major value proposition to your customer. So that was a good lesson. What did work quite recently is this example of our Lumea product, which is a hair removal product. Which is actually quite an expensive buy for consumers. I think it's around 400 or 500 euros, depending on the type. And people are hesitant to buy this, also because they don't know, will this work for me? And so should I invest this amount of money if I don't even know if it will work? I've tried so many things. So this is why we have moved to a subscription model where people can try it out for a couple of months and then buy it afterwards if it does work. Now you might say, this is not so circular either, right? Try and buy is something else than leasing or having this Exos model for forever. We actually tried that out. We started with Lumea Lease, it was called even, but it didn't sort of hatch on to the consumer. So again, something where the consumer said, okay, I don't understand this benefit, and this one I do understand. So, and we strongly believe that it's good to have a North Star vision and continuously remember where you want to go as a company, but it's okay also to explore that step by step and to really learn from the steps you are taking. And by the way, all the products that come back from consumers that don't want to use them anymore get refurbished and get also are put back on the market at a slightly lower price point as a refurbished product. And there's maybe, so one last trend that I wanted to mention also here is the really explosive rise of e-commerce and the promise that it holds, but also the barriers that it sees. I think we all recognize this, right? So as we sit here, we are all consumers, and I think we all love the promise of e-commerce that you can just order things from the internet, get it shipped to your home, see if it fits, see if it is to your liking, and send back maybe even 80% of it. That's fantastic. At the same time, of course, the drawback is that many of these products, if not most of them, will be scrapped by the company that you ordered it from. Which is horrific, right? Going back also to the food waste stories that we heard before. So, and I think all of us have a bit of this schizophrenic mindset, right? So you want to have the comfort that is offered to you, but at the same time, you don't want to see all of this waste. So what do you do about it? And we think as a company, you should try to take responsibility for what you can do about it, rather than trying to change the behavior of the customer that is the way it is currently. And that's why we launched this 5R project. 5 R's, so I'll think about the words without an R in here as well. But really trying to optimize with our supply chain the return logistics, and then taking back as many products as possible, repair them, refurbish them, and if that's not possible anymore, recycle it, and putting it back in a refurbished way on the market, just like I said, what we do with our Lumea project. So maybe to conclude, I think what we see is that the customer or the consumer space is slowly changing, slowly adapting to new business models, as long as they see the benefit of it. And that's a responsibility you should take as a company, to always think about what is the value proposition that drives us together into the direction that we want to be. And I started off by saying that this is a true driver for innovation for us. And also there we see a big change that needs to be happening, right? So you cannot just design a green or a circular product anymore. Already at the incipiation of the of the innovation, you need to be there together with product designers, marketeers, business developers, etc. at the start, thinking about not only what kind of product are you making, but how will I put this on the market. And that's a big change and systemic shift actually within our company as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Thanks, Harold. We'll save the questions for the panel, starting in a bit.
Good.
Many thanks. Philip's doing many experiments, and we'll pick up on those later on. Next, we're going to kind of shift tone a little bit and go towards the how question. How to get started, what support is there, and how to build your solutions in your company in this room. Our next speaker is the CEO of Avanta Ventures, a leading Nordic corporate venturing house. Pia is one of the key players behind Loop Ventures, arguably one of the first accelerators in the world that focuses on the implementation of circular economy ventures. Please help me welcome a Nordic circular economy wizard, Pia Maranen.
Thank you. Thank you. Whoa, what an introduction. Hopefully I can manage the expectations. So my name is Pia Maranen. Happy to be here. And I'm actually representing the whole Loop Ventures team, which is a big bunch of professionals behind this hands-on venturing program. Like Daniel said, I think there's lots of talks about what should be done, and I think everyone here in the room, we all share the same understanding that something should be done. But I think what we have done here in the Loop Ventures, that we have kind of stopped the talking about what should be done and moved to actually acting now. Our mission is really to help companies, big and small, to act on circular economy. We really want to emphasize that no matter how small you start, you need to start. There has been enough talking and enough researching, enough saying what should be done. Now it's time to get your hands dirty, really start doing, and that's what we think that we can help in the Loop Ventures. This is a joint program together with Avanta Ventures and Sitra and Nordic Innovation, and there are lots of more people involved, and I'm really happy to tell you that the other thing that really is supporting with the actions, we also talk about business. And I think this is the other thing that is really important when we talk about circular economy. We really need to talk about money. We need to build business models that are new economy for everyone within the value chain. And this is where we are aiming to. So Loop Ventures, in a nutshell, is a hands-on venturing program where we help big organizations, startups, in sort of consortiums where we actually help them to move the transition period from linear to circular. And I'll give you 3 examples what we do. How we do it actually, in very simple way, we give them resources. Maybe it's about validating rapidly with customers, maybe it's about scaling, or maybe it's about building ecosystems. All these 3 models we have found are very useful when you start your movement to circular. This one case what we have in the Loop Ventures is a really interesting company, Finnish company, who started with the question that is there a market for kids outwear as a service? We have been hearing about Piri's talk about that there is a huge market for business as a product as a service. But this company particularly wanted to know if there is a market also for the kids wear. And it's a big corporation, and it requires quite a lot of courage to change the whole business model from producing a product to changing into a totally different business. And that's where we can help. With the help of Loop Ventures, this company, Reima, managed in 12 weeks to find out that there's a really customer need for this kind of a product as a service model. And also, within 12 weeks, we managed to launch a completely new product. or service, if you want to put it that way. So Reima Play was launched in 12 weeks, and now we are really eager to see what happens, whether that will be a great success. Everything shows that it will be, but let's see. The other thing what we can help within the Loop Ventures is scaling. We heard many stories that to be impactful, we need to scale. We really need to do that fast. In the opening speech, it was all about scaling and doing faster. So this is where we can help also. My example on scaling comes from the Norwegian startup Fjong, which is really interesting peer-to-peer clothes as a service platform where you can actually put your wardrobe to earn you some money. It's a really interesting concept, and what we have found out that it's very successful in Norway, and now we're helping them to scale to other markets. And happy to help Peerly as well for your go-to-market plans. Fjong has 45,000 users within its home market, Norway, and what's really funny and nice is that actually they also have created a new income for the people lending out their clothes. So there is a very new business model within there as well, and very, very disruptive in this business. And what we do there is to help them to scale to another market as well. My third example of how we can help, how we can hands-on help to companies that are on the mission to saving the planet, to actually do something impactful. We have been working with a company who started with the question that how to create value from an environmental problem. So let me introduce to you Origin by Ocean. Really, really inspirational company on a mission to make a world a better place by using the biomass from our seas, and at the same time cleaning up the oceans and our waters. So where do we fit in as a Loop Ventures? Well, Origin by Ocean wants to build a biorefinery, but they cannot do them on their own. I think lots and lots of these circular actions, what we're doing, whether it's a big company or small startups, we need to build an ecosystem. We really need partners. And this is really one of those cases where you can simply not be impactful on your own. Origin by Ocean, they're really brilliant in building the biofactory, building the products that clearly have a market need. But where we can help them is getting them the ingredient, the needed ingredient, which in this case is the sea, blue-green algae from the sea. So I'm really happy to launch an open innovation call for everyone here in the audience. I'm hoping that together we can help Origin by Ocean to build the ecosystem, what is needed to make a big impact. So you can Google the internet, you will find this one. And if you have a solution for blue-green algae harvester, ping me, and you will be part of the ecosystem and changing the planet with us. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. Well, could you have a seat and join the panel? But one more thing. Could I ask all of you to stand up, please? Let's do a little bit of shake your arms first, and then shake your legs. And now I want you to put one hand up and do the circularity dance. 360. Woo! So just to practice this, we're going to need this one of these nights in Helsinki. So just keep in mind. Okay, thanks, Pia.
Thank you for that.
You can have a seat, please. So we're going to soon be moving into the panel. But before that, and thanks for the dance, it looks great. Our next speaker is the Executive Director of the Center for the Circular Economy at Closed Loop Partners, an US-based venture capital company. And the center is in New York, and it's a hub for collaboration, research, investment, and innovation in the areas of packaging, food, the built environment, and textiles. Please help me welcome to the stage the leading circular economy influencer in the United States, or one of them, Kate Daly. Yes, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel, and it's great to be here in Helsinki. I live in New York City, and so in my apartment, I don't have room for 300,000 objects like the typical American house, but that statistic does not surprise me. And at Closed Loop Partners, we are an investment firm who is looking both upstream and downstream to identify circular solutions to bottlenecks in the supply chain with our corporate partners. We've identified a $2 trillion opportunity in the United States if we were to stop throwing away our resources. And it's critical that innovation and investment happen at every stage of the value chain if we're to transition from our current leaky linear system to a circular one. In the United States, we have inexpensive landfills, but what we don't have is a national recycling policy, a circular economy strategy, or the carrots and sticks like legislation and the financial incentives that the European Commission has deployed here in Europe. And so what we've seen is that it's largely the private sector who's taken a leadership position in advancing circularity, and that's primarily who we're working with. So we're seeing that consumers and brands are starting to ask questions about where the products come from and where do they end up. And for startups, it's really critical that they see, where is there an opportunity for experimentation as they're disrupting the status quo. And for corporations, we're seeing that they're starting to accelerate their commitment to post-consumer recycled content and their commitment to reducing packaging. At Closed Loop, we invest in and partner on projects within these three verticals: apparel, packaging, food, and the built environment. And we've seen a real uptick in the amount of investment in waste prevention and also new materials and alternative materials in response to some of these consumer demands. And so I'm going to talk today about two examples in apparel and packaging where we're working to advance circularity in the US. So what is one tool that we use? Of course, it's investment. We have a fund that invests in building recycling infrastructure throughout North America, and this is in partnership with global brands like Coke and Pepsi, Unilever, and Amazon, and we're helping them meet their goals for post-consumer recycled content in their products. We also have a venture fund with equity investments in early-stage circular economy business models and circular economy products with these startups. And so we see that iteration is critical. As startups are trying to scale up, there needs to be a certain amount of experimentation. And as incumbents are trying to transition to circularity for the life cycle of their products, there's going to be a huge amount of experimentation and iteration that's needed and time in order for them to scale. And so we see that there's a need to support bridge efforts as we are on the path toward a more circular future. And there's nowhere more important than supporting these bridge efforts in plastic. As everybody in this room knows, the majority of plastics that are produced in the world today end up in landfills or incinerated, or worst case, in our waterways. And so at Closed Loop Partners, we're investigating what are some opportunities for investment in technology and other areas that can help fill this gap and supplement mechanical recycling as one solution. And so earlier this year, we released a report. We did a survey and landscape mapping of 60 technology providers who are using chemical recycling technologies, whether decomposition, conversion, or purification, to transform plastic waste into the building blocks of new materials. But what we found in this study is that it takes an average of 17 years from lab stage to growth stage for these new and innovative technologies to become successful. And that's not fast enough for us. So we identified what are some of the obstacles. One obstacle is a lack of capital investment, and the other is some policy challenges that all of these different types of technologies face. And so we're now convening brands from across different industries, whether it's apparel, petrochemical, or packaged goods, who have a shared interest in making sure that their materials can have a second life and more than a second life. And we're bringing together investors and investigating what are the market incentives that can help some of these companies succeed. And this is not an issue that simply, of course, for plastic waste, but also for textiles, which are now largely made of plastic and with hybrids of diverse plastic materials that really need innovative new solutions if we're going going to keep those molecules in play. And the rate of production, the acceleration of production in the fashion industry today is running at an unprecedented pace. And so it's more urgent than ever that we identify ways to align the design phase with the infrastructure that exists to manage these materials. And so here are two examples of companies that we invest in our investment portfolio. 4 Days is a membership model for subscription-based. You subscribe, you get a t-shirt. When you're done with it, you return it and get a new one, and the one that you returned is recycled. And so it's a relationship-based company. And the second is Evernew, which is a chemical recycling process to take post-consumer cotton garment waste and turn it into new fiber that can be used for new clothes. And so the big question for us all here today and every day is, how do we scale emerging innovations like these? And our answer is that in addition to investment, collaboration is absolutely critical. And this means collaboration among competitors, collaboration across industries, the public sector, the private sector, and it also requires that we bring together some unusual bedfellows. And last year we did a project that did just that when we addressed how do we reinvent the paper cup. 250 billion cups are produced each year. Most of these go into the trash. These paper cups are actually partially a plastic cup with a plastic liner. And we partnered with Starbucks and McDonald's to launch a quest to identify a solution that's 100% recyclable and 100% compostable. And this was an unprecedented collaboration among these two competitors, along with some other brands. We identified 12 solutions. You may have had a cup of coffee in one of the solutions. One of our Innovation Challenge winners was Kotka Mills, the Finnish company that hosted the cups here today at the conference. And we have 6 of those companies in our Circular Business Accelerator. But the real prize for these companies is the opportunity, potentially, to sell their product into the supply chain of global companies like Starbucks and McDonald's. And closing the loop on that opportunity for startups is a really critical part of the role that we play. And so looking ahead, I think I'd conclude that collaboration and pre-competitive collaboration are really critical as our investing capital all through every stage of the value chain. And we have much to learn, so I'm delighted to be here today to learn from all of you in the coming days of the conference. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kate. We'll come back to questions in the panel. The message wall is on fire. That's excellent. You guys want to know a lot of things. But 2 more speakers before the panel. Next, I want to introduce a speaker who is no stranger to startup acceleration. She is a Singularity University alumni, and her company, Carboculture, is currently being accelerated at Stanford StartX, which is one of the leading accelerators in the world. She has done a lot of amazing stuff that there's no time to talk about now, but please help me welcome CEO and co-founder of Carboculture, Henrietta Kekäläinen.
Kiitos. All right. We don't need to talk much about the carbon problem because all of us understand that we have a 1 trillion ton debt in the atmosphere that we need to pay back pretty quickly. And that's why we've been thinking, what is the quickest way to move all that carbon down from the atmosphere and into a functional product? I'll give you one hint, people aren't very good at that. So we decided to go with Mother Nature because she's pretty good at it. She's practiced for 1 million years, and she moves hundreds of gigatons annually in the carbon cycle. So what we do is we turn biomass waste into a functional carbon form. So this biochar that I have in my jar here, this is about 1.5 pounds of CO2 that's not going to escape for about 500 years. And that's where the compound interest comes from. So basically, this is what we do in a nutshell, totally pun intended. We take them, we put them in our magic technology, and then we carbonize them into this high-value biochar. Biochar is used in a variety of industries. Where we've focused for a while now is actually in cities. So cities use it to enhance the resilience of their green infrastructure, filter out some toxins, grow their canopy, and actually save money. So again, why is this better to partially combust this biomass instead of letting it, for example, be used as compost only, is that this is the natural carbon cycle. Now, there's no real absolute numbers on these. So this is from NASA, like, let's just go with this right now. But approximately hundreds of gigatons of carbon dioxide is taken down from the atmosphere into all sorts of biomaterials and biomass, and then naturally released back into the atmosphere as decaying biomass. So when trees die, where do they go? Well, about 1% goes underground, and the rest of it goes back into the atmosphere. That's normal, except that we have those human emissions. So what we do is we hack this carbon cycle. So when that carbon is already drawn down, we take it, we repackage it into a new form, into a much more usable form that can also be used in materials and stuff like that. Why is this better? Again, just to run through the numbers, if you have biomass and you have 100 million tons of biomass in one place, it's going to be 100 million tons, or give or take, also if it's a natural ecosystem, in 50 years. But if you actually take the waste biomass and start compounding it into the soil, there's a lot of different ecosystem benefits as well as the carbon sequestered. You limit NOx emissions, you have a healthier soil that starts compounding the carbon, etc. And who we're looking for are cities and people who work with soil anywhere, basically, or who are looking at carbon materials. But I was asked to also mention a few things. So where we are today, about 14 or 15 months ago, we got our hardware and started building our venture. But before that, there was already 10 years of academic research put into this, this technology that we're using today, and what's making a big difference in being agile and rapidly deployable technology instead of being very limited to the energy production sector. So of course, the first thing that helped us get here was the university and its excellent IP licensing office. And this sounds really boring, but actually the fact that the university had people who were completely familiar with working with startups. For example, they do not take a part of the startup. They take IP royalties, and you have some sort of a license agreement there. But these are still some things that we need to brush up, especially here in Finland, but also in other countries. The second thing was definitely, of course, meeting my co-founder. We went to Singularity University, and in 2013, it was a place where 80 people from around the world were brought for an extremely intensive period at NASA, where we got 10 weeks to figure out what the hell we're going to do to improve the situation of this planet. And there we decided to work on environment. And fast forward a few years, we actually got started as well. And the third thing, definitely, that's been very helpful lately, and what's also quite a special case is the StarDex program where we have been. And it's not a typical accelerator. Again, they didn't take any equity, for example. So it's more like a founder network. And they've taken the top 1,500 companies and founders from Stanford and visiting founders to be in this program and to help each other. So the mentors that we had all exited a minimum of 3 businesses before they came to help us. Some people in the program were far further in their ventures, and they came back to give their help to us. And another thing that was interesting is that you might know that the VC dollar is a losing dollar. So VC as a whole industry actually loses money. But there's a few, of course, winners that are picked from certain funds, and then those startups are usually fattened until they get another bigger valuation or exit or something like that. But actually what StarDex thought is that, no, let's do this the other way around. So in their program, 83% of all the companies that they took in are still growing or acquired after 3 years. And if you've got an over 3 million investment, that means that 93% of their companies are still growing or acquired after 8 years. And that's something that we should look more towards, to supporting a lot of companies that are doing great work and help them support each other as well. And of course, we have great investors on board, and hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit more. But mainly, what really helps us also is having more and more understanding of what our customers need, and that in turn helps us grow all the time. And we'll be taking more questions in the panel, hopefully. Thank you.
Hey,
Yes.
thank you very much. You can have a seat here. So finally, finally but not least, we have Julien Guerrier. So he's an expert of 25 years in funding SMEs in industrial policy and in corporate management. Currently, Julien is heading the European Executive Agency for SME funding. And you might know Horizon 2020. You might know some of the success stories they've had in circular economy. So please help me welcome Julien Guerrier, Director of EASME.
Well, thanks a lot, Daniel. And yes, as you said it, my name is Julien Guerrier. Some of you may know that guerrier in French means warrior, so maybe I was destined to be an earth warrior, as the young people called for us to be this morning. Tessa, I was struck when I looked at your ambassadors for Olio this morning that most of them were from Northern Europe, actually. So we're in the right place here today. We were in the right place last year in Japan because they are quite advanced in their policy. But we're in the right place because the European Commission has just released a study precisely showing that Nordic millennials are the change makers. They are the most circular and the most open to do circular economy business in the world. So it would be interesting to see what are the reasons behind. Is it education? Is it culture that led them to be there so that we could spread the best practices across the world? Previous speakers have insisted a lot on the necessity to take into account end users and their behaviors, their consumer behaviors, from the beginning in the design of products, but also in the design of business models, in order to support the uptake of new circular economy business models and products. At EASME, the EU agency for SMEs, we are doing precisely that. We are trying to fund SMEs, but not only SMEs, from the different points of the circle in the circular economy, including from the point of view of the consumer behavior. If I give you an example of one of the many, many projects, there are more than 4,000, that we are funding, Circ4Pack, which is here today. It's a project that is bringing together end users and industrial players in order to co-create new circular economy business models. They meet in so-called innovation camps, where they're together in order to co-create new business practices that take into account how products will be used, how they will be consumed, and to bring that knowledge back to the design place. They are doing that in order to make the products more recyclable, to create new markets for used products, to reduce waste in areas that vary from LED lighting, tablet recycling, meat production, micro-farming, and many, many other sectors. So what I would like to do in my short address today with you is to underline three messages today. The first one is that the European Commission, you heard it this morning from Commissioner Vella, is mainstreaming circular economy models. It is doing so, and it is making it a priority in its policy, in its regulations, but also in its funding instruments and the ones that we are managing at EASME. My second point is that the results of the projects that we fund show that circular economy business models make not only environmental sense, but also economic sense. And the third one, it's one of the lessons that we drew from the projects that we saw. The most successful ones are the ones that are bringing together several stakeholders: business, industry, public authorities, civil society, research. And that's what we need to do if we really want to accelerate the pace of innovation in the circular economy. So let me come to my first point, which is how we are mainstreaming circular economy at the European Commission. What we are doing is to respond, of course, to the social environmental, economic challenges that we've heard this morning, but we are doing so also to respond, in a sense, to the pressure and the demand that we are getting from industry and from consumers. From industry, because we hear from them every day that the raw materials that we use in the production of electronics or any other things are not infinite, and they cannot be produced anymore. They are getting depleted. At the same time, consumption is growing, and the rise in the world population is increasing pressure on raw materials. So we need to preserve them, we need to reduce waste, and to exploit the economic value of our resources efficiently, of all our resources. From the citizens, because I see every day, every Thursday, actually once a week, down from my office, the thousands and thousands of young people that are demonstrating in order to ask for us to take our responsibility and do our contribution to save the planet. This is important not only because it has an impact on consumer behaviors that we were talking about this afternoon, but also because it has an impact on policymakers, and you will hear from me in a minute how. Applying circular economy principles in all sectors and industries, we have calculated in Europe, could generate an economic benefit of 1.8 trillion euros by 2030. So that's probably about, Kate, the $2 trillion that you have calculated for the US. We could save 1 million jobs or create 1 million new jobs by that date. There is a clear business case, and the reason for which we are starting to see the successes of our Circular Economy Action Plan is that it's a comprehensive plan. It's a unique plan that is involving all the stakeholders I was mentioning, and that is looking at the problem from all the different angles along the whole cycle. Through the measures that we are taking, and let me mention a few of them, we heard this morning about the EU plastic strategy and the legislation on single-use plastics. It was just adopted 2 weeks ago by the Council. It will protect the environment from plastic pollution, but it will also foster, we hope, growth and innovation. All plastic packaging will have to be completely recyclable by 2030 in the EU. Plastic items that have alternatives will be banned, and member states will be encouraged to make better use of taxation and other economic instruments in order to reward the uptake of recycled plastics. We have also revised the waste legislative framework in order to ensure that we have more ambitious recycling targets across the spectrum, not only for plastics. That entered into force in July last year. We are broadening the scope for our eco-design rules and the energy labeling measures that you see on all appliances that are sold now in European stores. And we heard this morning the one message of Stintje van Veldhoven, the Minister for the Environment in the Netherlands, which was use procurement, use public procurement, use procurement in private companies. Well, there are now new and revised EU green public procurement criteria that can be included, that are including circular economy aspects. And the European Commission is leading by example in this field, because we are using green public procurement criteria in 93% of all our procurement contracts above 60,000 euros. So those and the other actions of the Circular Economy Action Plan have an impact on jobs, on growth. But what I would like to underline is that they were also very smoothly adopted by the Council and the Parliament. I saw many legislative processes in the EU in the past 20 years. This is probably the one that was the fastest. It was the fastest precisely because of the pressure we got from the street. The demand was there, and policymakers in the Parliament and in the Council felt the responsibility to generate the necessary compromises to produce rapid legislation. We are funding projects, and I see that time is always up. is already up, so I will be fast. But there, what I would like to underline, there is the figure of 10 billion euros that we have invested in circular economy in the past couple of years. That was mentioned this morning by Commissioner Vella. We are adding to it in the next 2 years in the programs for research and innovation, Horizon 2020, but LIFE also that we are managing for the climate and the environment. And in the next programming period, from 2021 to 2027, we intend to increase again the funding that we will give in order to generate the technological innovations that we need to roll out and scale up the circular economy. What we are doing as well, but perhaps I will skip that and I can come back to it in the discussion. But let me just give you one example to finish of a research and innovation project that we are funding, which is called FORCE. It's worth 11 million euros of European funding, and there you have 4 cities, Copenhagen, Hamburg, Lisbon, and Genoa, that have established participatory partnerships for a circular economy. What they do is that they are redesigning and engaging the entire supply chain, manufacturers, cities, waste recycling companies, research and charity organizations, and they are addressing recycling and sharing economies in various fields such as plastic, metals, food, bio-waste, wood. In Lisbon, to give you an example, they have developed through this project a web application that manages the donation of surplus food and the allocation of this food among residents who need it. So that may be complementary to Olio or maybe a future competitor. But in order to test the web application, 4 donors were selected in the food industry, retail and hotel sectors. And the results in the test period only showed that thousands of meals were donated, 17 tons of CO2 were avoided, 4 tons of organic waste were avoided, and that was the test period. So there is a huge potential there for the rollout of such business models. If you want to know more, I can only invite you to go and visit our stand outside and also to attend the side sessions that we are organizing during the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julien. Please have a seat, and let's welcome our other speakers to join the stage and the panel. Please, Dan, Tessa, and Harald. So, yes, a big hand. Wow, a lot of information, a lot of questions, a lot of topics. I want to start with, actually the audience is building a bit of a kind of a contradiction or a challenge here. That is actually these sharing models. For example, Peerby versus Philips. Is there a contradiction for the business of creating new products, what Philips is doing, and then circulating the products and optimizing the use? Or is it in clothing apparel, as Kate said, and in clothing with clothing companies? So how do you see this kind of contradiction?
Yeah, I don't think, thanks for the question, I don't think there is a contradiction. I think this is where the world is heading. And we are trying to learn from what we see in our business-to-business areas, right? So what we see there, it's not, so people ask this often, right? So are you not cannibalizing your own business by not selling products anymore? Yeah. We see the major business value here is the total change of relationship you get with your customers. Yeah. Right? If you move from this transactional sales of a product that might last for 10 years, you might see this customer, just hypothetically speaking, only once every 10 years. Now you move to a service model where you are with the customer every day almost, and really understanding the customer way better and moving into a partner relationship where you can, on the spot, deliver solutions that the customer needs the most at that point. Mm-hmm. Now we're not there yet, I think, in the consumer space, but that's also the promise that we see there, that if you move more and more to service models, that you get a different loyal relationship with your consumers, which is way more valuable than just this transactional sales of a single product. Yeah.
So in a way, it's a necessary shift and almost creative destruction in a way that's where you see the future.
Yes.
I would fully agree. I think it's only a threat to businesses that refuse to align their business model with a new reality. But companies that want to make great products that they can be proud of, that last a long time, or easy to repair, that want to align their incentives with consumers, because there's a very big friction right now between manufacturers and consumers through the buying model.
Yeah.
I mean, like if I'm a manufacturer, I need to create a product that is designed for obsolescence, that will break down in a few years, because I'm out of business if I don't. By creating new business models, we can align these incentives, and we can have better products. So I think good manufacturers that create good products don't have to be threatened at all.
I think also if the companies didn't do that, then somebody else would come in and do that for their business sector. So if you look at like used iPhones or used Androids, the companies haven't done it, so somebody else has. So it's also wonderful that you guys and companies like Patagonia or somebody are doing that themselves. It makes sense.
And I'll just add that there's a tremendous value there and revenue opportunity for companies. And one unintended consequence that we could see is that in apparel, many of the fashion companies are saying that when they start a rental model for their own products, they see an uptick in sales in their regular business model. And so if we're just continuing overproduction and you can buy more and rent more at the same time, then we've short-circuited the circular goals. And so something to be mindful of as we experiment and are in this transitional moment.
Yeah. Let's pick up on that. So we talked about the business opportunity of circular economy, and maybe especially Kate, Juliana, and Pia, you see the deal flow of circular economy startups. You see all kinds of companies and success cases, others as well. If you were to dedicate your life to being an entrepreneur in the circular space, where would you see the biggest business opportunity? Where would you create that next unicorn? In what area? I want to hear about this.
Well,
who dares to go first?
I'll start, and I'll say that if I were to become an entrepreneur, what I would be most excited about is the multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure gap in the United States.
Yeah.
Right? Our bridges are going to collapse. Please continue to come and visit, but don't go over any bridges. And we have so many aspects of our infrastructure that's long overdue for repair. And so this is a tremendous economic opportunity. And so if we were to rebuild that infrastructure using circular building construction materials, circular processes, and business models, that would be a tremendous opportunity. That's what I would love to do, but since the US is so far behind Europe in the transition, I would probably instead focus on fashion and apparel, where there's huge disruption at a very fast pace.
Yeah. Others?
As a public organization, we're trying not to direct the markets. We have bottom-up programs that are really letting the innovations emerge from various sectors. But I think we heard it from everybody today. It's the sharing economy. It's the business models moving from owning to sharing products, services that is, in my view, the real business opportunity for the future.
I agree.
I think I would go there to the sharing economy and the product-as-a-service models, because I think, like I think you said in the beginning, it's I think at some point in the coming years it'll be funny to own things, many of the things. So I'm sure I'd probably go to interview my kids or my neighbors' kids and talk to them and see what kind of future they'd like to build, and then come up with a service model.
Mm-hmm. So what are the barriers then for that? I mean, if you think of a sharing economy, obviously you have to move the stuff somehow, and you have to make it convenient and kind of cheap enough that it makes sense, especially if it's a low-value item. If it's a bigger item and with better value, it might be easier. But this is one barrier. What kind of barriers do you feel that there are that are preventing some of the companies from really scaling and skyrocketing?
I think.
So we've got around that logistics barrier by removing all logistics and literally connecting neighbours directly with each other. So there is no need to be shipping stuff around. So we've solved that one problem, but in doing so we've got another problem, which is that actually neighbours don't know each other anymore. So back to the kind of viral growth model, it's far more challenging because people don't know who their neighbours are, so they can't help spread the word. But to answer the first part of your question, for me, one of the biggest barriers is consumer mindset, sort of shift that needs to change. And the reality is, I think we're very, very early in that journey.
Well, one barrier that we see is funding, actually. It's the lack of trust of investors in novel models. And that's where we are trying to invest public money and de-risk the private investments. And perhaps as a side note, a barrier that is a bit more surprising, but we see from time to time, is the lack of legislative framework, of regulatory framework for new products or services.
Yeah.
So we have sometimes projects that come back to us or to national authorities and say, well, in order to actually roll out our innovation, we would need some legislative action, some regulatory framework to be put in place.
And Dan, what did you have in mind?
Yeah, I'd like to add to the combination of funding, and you mentioned iteration. I think when you're developing new models, you can't just copy what's already there. So it's a lot harder than taking something that's very close to the linear existing economy and just sort of tweaking it. This is creating a whole new model, often with a whole new ecosystem around it. So that takes a lot more research, a lot more iteration. And I think a lot of investors are not used to that. They still think in terms of you create one business plan, you execute on it, and you're successful. Or here is you create a plan, you execute on it, you fail. You create another plan, you execute on it, you discover something until you figure out how it actually works. And that's the real work and the real
reality.
process. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other takes on this one?
I think that to get a lot more kind of circular economy or impact investing or all of these kinds of new areas, we need more like examples like Beyond Meat 2 weeks ago, nice IPO there. Really great kind of vegan food goes on IPOs now in NASDAQ, like that's pretty awesome. And kind of getting more examples of using also negative value feedstocks, for example, like in our cases, and maybe the government has a role there to actually put a price on plastic or something to dispose of, and that gives a tipping fee to the companies who are trying to start using them.
Yeah.
One comment on elaborating what Tessa just said. I think it all comes down to offering customers very easy change, a way to change their behavior. As long as, I mean, we like our cozy life, and if it's easier to buy than rent, you know, we're all going to buy. That's the fact. So I think it's whether it's a big company or a startup, it's very crucial to think about how to make that very smooth, the whole experience, and very, very easy.
Yeah. Excellent. We have to be ending this soon. Unluckily, I was too nice to you. I didn't cut your speeches, so. But last question, very quick answers. If you had the superpowers right now, and you could fix one of these barriers mentioned, like this, what would you do? What would you fix to make this thing scale and mainstream faster than it would? One barrier. Let's start around.
For me, it has been said already. For me, it's really on the customer mindset, customer behavior. Yeah. I think if you look at the way the plastics movement took on with all the pictures, horrible pictures of plastics in the ocean, etc. If I look at my sector, we don't have that for electronic waste. Even though there's 15 million tons of electronic waste every year that we produce as a world population, we can build Eiffel Towers and cover the whole Manhattan area with Eiffel Towers every year with e-waste. So we need those kind of pictures also to change the mindset of consumers. Yeah.
Building on that, I would wave a magic wand so that the media industry would cover the climate crisis as if it was a war and give it the right level of coverage and dialogue that it deserves.
Oh. Woo.
If I could flip a switch, I would want everybody to switch to an economic model where we pay the true price of our consumption, because I think that will accelerate all the businesses, all the other models that are trying to create a better economic system. Yeah.
Well, I would develop a methodology to price, to evaluate and then price the cost, the full cost over the whole cycle of materials into the products that we're using.
Yeah, probably building on that, like less subsidies to bad stuff, like tax them and give it to the good stuff, and probably like maybe carbon stuff. And also another thing is that the climate rhetoric should change a little bit so that it includes everyone. So in some cases it can be, food security or, national or group interest or something like that. But we're all talking about the same thing, and this is such a big thing that we can't exclude people who want to act in it, even though they're coming from a different angle.
Yeah.
I think that the superpower would be a superhero called Procurement Woman. And I think we might have met her this morning, the Dutch Minister of the Environment. But I think that we can't just continue to push these materials into our ecosystem. We have to generate strong pulls for the materials, and procurement is an amazing tool for that.
I think I would maybe use the superpower on getting the subjects to schools and daycares and stuff like that because there is the demand there. I think the pull, there is they want to learn, the younger generation, they want to learn. So I think in today's world, equal to math and languages could be, the environmental issues.
Great. Let's give a big hand to our speakers. And we're going to end here, but I'm going to say that we should all take action and take note of these things. And I dare to say that these people are here to help you. If you want to think about how to get going, what is the first step? I say, come and speak to us, right?
Start, yes.
Start. Yeah, just do it. That's the thing. So next we have a break and then an interesting session in this room coming up. So thank you very much for joining. Yes, thank you.